This is Dave Brixius.
This is Ed O'Brien.
And this is the CFA, the program. All right, week number 1 down of the CFA playoffs, man. What a great way to kick everything off. One of the big things I saw, at least, over the first week is you saw most of the higher seeds win. There really wasn't any major, upset, like a 1 beat, an 8 beat and a 1 or anything like that. It was pretty much held true to form. You saw a couple 5-4s and stuff like that, 6-3 here and there. But for the most part, you didn't see any major upset that you normally see sometimes in these early rounds. Somebody taking somebody light. So that's good for those upper seeds. They actually were paying attention, or maybe when we were talking last week, say make sure you're prepared, ready to go.
In the game I watched last week, East Pennsboro, Mechanicsburg on a pony level. It was actually 8-0 at halftime for Mechanicsburg.
Okay.
So they, it was 8 versus 1 seed there. But in the second half, Mechanicsburg, eventually took over. East Pennsboro Ponies played a pretty, tough game, but they kind of ran out of gas. Mechanicsburg kind of overpowered them in the second half.
Okay.
They're
moving on
to the semifinals. Final four now.
Yeah, one of the things I saw was Central Dauphin last year's midget program. They had like 2 or 3 championships in a row. They played Harrisburg. The number 1 seed. It was a 13-8 game. So the 1 versus 8, that was probably the closest 1 versus 8 that I saw out of any really level there, where a team in 8 seed had a chance. But Central Dauphin had that vibe. They had 2 or 3 wins. All year in the regular season. They know how to win the playoffs sometimes. You just find a team that just gets hot and they ride that. And they gave Harrisburg everything they had, but Harrisburg's moving on. And you look at it. At that midget level, you got Harrisburg back. They're going to be playing Redland this year. Harrisburg did beat them during the regular season. You also got Cumberland Valley at that midget level playing Redland. And even though Cumberland Valley is a 3 seed, Redland's a 2, Cumberland Valley has actually, won that game earlier on in the season, real early in the season, week number 3. So you're going way, way back and stuff like that. You didn't see a lot of, one of the things I didn't see so much of is the new teams coming in. You know what I mean? 3 teams. Hershey did. Hershey represented pretty well, a couple of the levels here where they moved on and stuff like that. But you really didn't see anything else, like Hummelstown or Northern Lebanon moving on at the next level. So it was probably a good thing they woke up. Got a little taste of the CFA, how the CFA is going to be played, so they'll be ready for next year.
Yep, and as we go through these matchups, coming up this weekend, a lot of these teams played each other during the regular season, and for the most part, are pretty close games. In the American Conference for the Pee-wees, you have number 1 seed York taking on Harrisburg. Week 4, York beat them 13-0. Yep. So you figured out probably be another, close game. You never know what happens. 13-0 is really not a blowout. I didn't see the game, but then you have number 3 Redland taking on Holy Name.
Yeah.
Holy Name took that. Holy Name is number 2 seed. Redland's number 3 seed. But Holy Name took that game, the first game of the season.
Yeah, in week 5, yeah. So, that was a close one, too. So, you're seeing a lot of that. Now you're getting to where these teams are better paired up. You're going to start to see, I think, a lot of close scores where it can go either way now. You still got to be worried as a 1 seed, worried about that 4 seed because you just don't know.
And, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of, there were a couple 4 or 5, I guess, upsets, but for the most part, everything is pretty much holding the form.
I think the lowest seed we have here is at the pony level, where Big Springs, I got to give them a shout out because their midget coach sent me information. He said all 3 of their teams were the lower seed at the Pee-wees, Ponies, and Midgets, and they all won. Whether they're a 5 seed or 6 seed and stuff like that, they all pulled off the W. So I think that's awesome, which is great. So we want to give a shout out to those guys down there at Big Springs. I think that's fantastic. Great job, gentlemen. And continuing the season, because that's what you look for. Can you continue? Can you get the W? Can you get the job done in the first round of the playoffs so we can get ready for the next round?
Yeah, they beat the number 3 seed, Bowling Springs, last week. So, in fact, they take on Good Shepherd this week, who they actually lost to 20-0 in week 2. So
early. That's early. That's very early.
Yeah, very early.
A lot of stuff. There's still the rust coming off some of these teams.
Yeah.
But there's a couple games that are being played that these teams have not seen each other yet, which would be very interesting to see because, this is where you might see it now. That higher seed might have a hard time because sometimes, if you don't match up correctly, even though they're the lower seed, you run into those problems. And, we're going all the way down to the midget level there. Boiling Springs playing West Perry, the midget, those two teams haven't seen each other, or Halifax and Big Spring. So you don't know what's going to happen. Halifax is at the midget level has been just rolling over people. I've been watching their scores all year, and they've been rolling over people at that midget level. So we'll see if they can do it again to Big Springs. Big Springs had a big win last week, like I said, knocking off the number 4 seed. So we'll see if they can do it again this week with the number 1 seed. It'll be tall order, but you never know.
And just looking at the national conference, especially at the pony level, you have the top 4 seeds still in it. You have number 3 Northern versus number 2 Stilton earlier this year. Actually, in week 8, a couple of weeks ago, Stilton won that game 6-0, and you have New Cumberland facing Mechanicsburg. Mechanicsburg won that earlier matchup in week 6, 24-7. But as we mentioned, it's the playoffs, so
Anything.
But that Mechanicsburg team is pretty tough. It's pretty tough.
And this is anything can go. Anything's possible to happen, and they got to be ready to come out and play this next round. They got to be ready to go. They got to have themselves up. And now that kids are getting a little tired, you sometimes lose that focus. Sometimes you lose certain things because basketball season is starting to creep in. Things like that starting to creep in. So we'll see if these teams are being able to continue to keep that focus, keep that drive alive. It's only 2 more weeks left. After this one, we're into the Super Bowl championship. A lot of the seasons will be done for kids.
Yeah.
And then after that, it is what? Turnpike Classic, baby.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing. We got to bring this up because I know you and I just found out about it this week. The 3 coaches coming back and coaching all together, huh?
Yeah, got it.
What do you think about that? I think that was the only game that the CFA didn't win at the higher level. It was against Wyoming Valley, if I'm not mistaken, last year. I could be wrong.
Did it beat that Delaware team?
Maybe it was a Delaware team too. CFA pretty much dominated the Turnpike Classic last year, but I'm almost positive they didn't beat the Wyoming Valley team because that was an unlimited team. So maybe I was wrong.
Bring it back?
Yeah, go for it.
Warren Ritter, who was commissioner last year. Dave Bickle,
head coach. Yep.
coach, and Tony
Buglio. Yeah, so you have an offensive coordinator, Tony. You have Warren, the defense coordinator, and you have Dave Bickle. Man, he's going to have a hard time keeping those two under wraps. He's going to have a hard time keeping those guys under wraps, so those guys. They're going to have definitely that team fired up, ready to go, which I think is going to be a great thing. I think that's the last game on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the late game.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing that, the CFA is bringing those guys back.
Yeah, definitely.
They have done a whole lot for their kids throughout years, decades.
Yes. Yeah. And we want to get those guys on. Hopefully, the next show. Talking about the Super Bowl, but also talking about that Turnpike Classic. We want to get them in so people can see and hear from these guys, because I think I think that's fantastic. Like you said, Tony's been a mainstay. When Super Bowl after Super Bowl, I think he had like 12 and 13 years or some astronomical number there at the midget level. Warren has been a mainstay with that commissioner. Coach Bickle, he was at Halifax for years, done a great job up there with the midget program, the Pee Wee program, has been a commissioner. He's been a big spearhead for the Devon kid, who's been trying to get the prosthetics. He's been a big spearhead of that. You got to give a lot of credit for. He got Tim Tebow to come in. So he's just done a phenomenal job. You know what I mean? So it's great to see those guys having an opportunity to come back, coach a game where it's not all that pressure. Let's be honest, where you got all this, people barking at you all day long. These guys get to relax, have a good time, teach these kids how it should be taught, and hopefully come out with that W.
But knowing those guys, I'll try to win it.
No question.
All kinds of plans.
You better believe it. That's why it's going to be fun to watch.
And that's a testament to them, and these other coaches out here as well. They give their time. They're all volunteers. Yep. I think people sometimes have to remember that.
Yes.
At the end of the day, these are volunteers.
Yes.
Giving their time to these kids, teach them this game of football,
yep.
which can also teach them about things in life. You can apply those things, lessons you learn. So
we always talk about it. It's the best conference out there, best league out there, anywhere that I've seen. Really, what they do for the kids.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? It's not just all about football. I mean, for them to hold that Turnpike Classic, for all these kids to play one extra game, to have an all-star ability, that's unbelievable. The amount of effort and time it takes to get all these guys together, and even that Super Bowl weekend, we were at it last year. How crazy was that? How do you run something like that? Seriously, I'd pull my hair out. As you see, I don't have any hair. That's probably why I pulled it all out. But you know what I mean? It's just unbelievable what they do to help the kids out. And that's what I think people have to understand. Don't just get all, they're not doing this, not doing that. You can only do so much in a day. Only do so much in a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So before we go, I just want to mention a couple other matchups.
Yep.
Pee-wees At the federal level, we have Big Spring versus West Perry, Boiling Springs versus Good Shepherd. On the pony level, on the pony level in the American Conference, have the Harrisburg Broncos versus Holy Name, York versus Redland. I think we mentioned Seven Stars versus West Perry, Big Spring versus Good Shepherd. And then on the midget level, we have Redland versus Harrisburg, Cumberland Valley versus Redland. I messed that up. Sorry about that. Let's see. We have Hershey versus Middletown, and Mechanicsburg again versus New Cumberland. So, actually, including West Perry, there's a couple other organizations with multiple teams in the playoffs, and we've seen this year after year after year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Coming down to the Final Four now, getting ready for that Super Bowl run. We'll see what teams come up and show up. All the kids that are out, now is your chance to start preparing for the next year, getting in. We're going to be talking about this a little bit more next week. We got some big coaches coming in helping us out with our PA, football academy,
yeah.
which is starting up November 15th. We got some great past guys, some past athletes, some past big-time athletes that are coming back. This is something you definitely want to get your kids involved in, and we'll be mentioning that next week.
Yep. And also, have the combine coming up as well.
Yep, that's going to be the weekend of the Turnpike Classic.
Yeah.
Which I think is the 15th too. So it's before our football thing. But guys, everybody out there, best of luck. All the players, coaches, continue to do what you guys are doing. You're not in it anymore, That's all right. Time to start preparing for next year. Get your speed in. Work what you're doing in the off season. I know you put a post up, which was great. What you're doing this all season is going to make you better for next year. So if you don't do anything, don't expect to be better next year. It just doesn't work like that. There's no magic out there. All right, there's no fairy dust that we can sprinkle on you.
And just doing a bunch of push-ups is not going to...
Yeah, no question about it. So you need to make sure you're doing the right stuff and getting the right kind of training. But definitely get out there, guys, every day. Continue to push yourself. Continue to work hard. This is Dave Brixius.
It's Ed O'Brien.
And this is the program, Unleash That Potential.